Hello and welcome to this brand new live stream with me, your host, Echo Chamberlain. You might recognize me as that curmudgeonly guy who does cynical takes on popular culture and entertainment, and that bloke who's been on open bar maybe half a dozen times. Now, two things are true in this world. One is that Hollywood is becoming a new modern day Sodom and Gomorrah. And the second is that your old pal, Echo Chamberlain, is prone to the worst kind of technical issues that can be glaringly awkward, painful for everyone, incredibly protracted, never stop, and sometimes even end in live streams going off before they've even begun. As you can hear outside, my neighbors are just finishing up some chopping and drilling or whatever. And despite my reasoning with them and trying to cross the language barrier with, I think, Cantonese, I think the gist is they'll be wrapping up shortly. Now, I'm not here alone because I'm going to be joined by some wonderful guests. And the first is from Illinois, which is, it's not the South, it's not the Great Lakes, it's not the Midwest, it's not the Rust Belt. Here to tell us exactly what the Illinois is our good friend, Greg Owen. Hello?
I'll tell you what Illinois is. It's broke. We have no money. That's the number one thing you should know about the state of Illinois. Also, if you ever heard of Abraham Lincoln, that's our claim to fame. 150, 130 years ago, Kentucky? We're still banking on that.
I thought he was Kentucky. What do you consider yourself to be? Are you a Southerner? Are you a Midwesterner?
Oddly enough, we call ourselves Midwesterners, but we are decidedly on the eastern half of the country. But Midwest is it's a very, very large portion of the map. It's basically everything that's not the South and coastal. They were just like, it's the Midwest. It's whatever. It's in there. Also called the flyover states, they call us.
Yeah, I was just about to ask. Are you in flyover country?
Absolutely, I am. Yes, I. It's a lot of cornfields and a lot of soybean fields. It's pretty much what you're going to see.
The most patronizing term ever coined for a region of any part of the world. Yeah. Well, I'll bring on our second guest. Now, the only thing more terrifying than the state of current Hollywood is receiving correspondence from the Canadian government in the mail, as experienced by my next guest, Vex Electronica.
Oh, great introduction. Hello, how is everyone?
Hey. We're good. So what is the situation there? It seems just by sheer dint of your sparkling personality and likability and relatability, it seems like the world has come to your rescue.
Yes, very thankful for the YouTube community for coming together. I did get notice just today that they've officially reopened my conviction. So
Right.
I should be expecting a court date in the next 4 weeks. I have a lawyer on it as well. So it's getting sorted. I'm just, I try not to fixate on negative things. There's a reason everything happens, right?
Yeah. Well, the liberal egalitarian paradise that is Canada, once described famously by President George W. Bush as our friendliest neighbors to the north. Now, my last guest, from the cultural and cinematic powerhouse of South Korea, he's personally driven the train to Busan. And he's won Squid Game 3 times over. It's very early in the morning, but it is Despot of Antrim. Can you hear us?
I can hear you very well, Echo.
Oh, that's great. This is a miracle. Everyone's here. There's no lagging or streaming issues, and everything's fine. It's great. All right, well, let's get to some of the news with my new fantastic news intro. All right, what do you all think of that?
I am so impressed by that. That is the most professional.
Like I've done a bunch of these, and I just feel so amateur now. Like this is your first one. I just haven't bothered with any of this. You're making me look bad here, man.
Yeah, you came really prepared for a first live stream.
Well, nothing that good old Canva.com subscription can't handle. So you two could reach those lofty heights. So let's get to some news. And look at this. I can even like divide stuff up and things. And I'll add this to the stage right here. So Greg, how was your Thanksgiving, by the way?
It was fantastic. I actually embarrassed myself this morning. The guy that does my thumbnails, because I can't do them, even with Canva, I still can't get them right. And I was emailing him this morning, and I wished him a happy Thanksgiving, but he lives in the UK, and I realized, no, that's purely an American holiday. I don't know why.
He's got nothing to be
celebrated, but it was fabulous. Thanksgiving's my favorite because I like to cook, and Thanksgiving's an excuse to make the most extra ridiculous fancy mac and cheese. I made some croque monsieur the day after. Like it was fabulous. I love it.
Wow. It's weird though, because you guys all get together with your families, you make difficult plans to crisscross the country. You have to be with your in-laws, and just when you've like divested yourself and purged yourself of all the angst and anger from your relatives in the difficult political positions, then a month later at Christmas, you got to do it all again. It seems so weirdly congested. I don't get it. Yes,
it is. But you know me, I got a bunch of kids. I have enough. Like I don't have anybody over. It's just my clan, and we're enough all by ourselves. So I avoid a lot of that familial stuff, which is nice.
Vex, is Thanksgiving sort of leaked over into Canadian culture at all?
Ours is in October. It's a whole month before, so I already celebrated long ago. But it's always nice to see what everyone's cooking anyways, and also how many people are positive about it, because otherwise I just hear like friends bitch about, oh, my family did this, my family did. I'm just like, my guy, I got nobody over here in Canada. Be grateful you can have family over for Thanksgiving.
Greg, did anyone make some kind of horrible green bean casserole that no one wanted to touch?
No, we didn't even make vegetables this year. I deep fried a turkey and then made mashed potatoes and gravy, mac and cheese, stuffing, and sweet potato. So it was a deep fried meat and pure carbohydrates with as much fat and sugar as I could get in. No vegetables to be seen. Don't need those on Thanksgiving.
Well, here on the screen, this is the traditional Disney Thanksgiving picture from, I think, the 60s or 70s. And look how wholesome it is and lovely. And then Disney decided they should update it. So there were a few suspicions online that it might have had something to do with it, but you be the judge. Looks realistic and nice and lovely. And the sense that there could be some AI issues stemmed from the fact that if you close up on a couple of things,
what's going on?
Looks a bit janky. Is that like a little Mickey Mouse, or is that supposed to be Max Goofy, the son of Goofy? I'm not sure. What's with his teeth?
Right. I imagine that's probably a representation of how much autism there is in children these days. So they really
I think that could be it.
That angle right. That's all.
I think he has an ear coming out the top, but he's also got an ear drooping below. I can't quite tell. Don't know what the situation is.
Or a tail, maybe?
I think it could be a tail. Yeah. But is it even possible to eat with teeth that far apart? There's an issue there.
Vampires do it, so I'm sure he'll manage.
I guess so. And then if you close up on this, Greg, can you tell me what Thanksgiving eating implement this is? Because
that's definitely AI. I've used AI in my videos, usually for satire. For example, I did an Indiana Jones for like a minute of my video. It was just AI images and AI music. And that happens a lot. So objects will blend together because the AI, an AI isn't actually an AI. It's called artificial intelligence. It's not. It's just an amalgamator. It just sees a bunch of stuff online and averages it out and gives you the result. So it's not the result of sovereign thinking. It's just an amalgamator. And what's happening there is it's seen a bunch of like knives, forks, spoons, and chopsticks, and it can't really distinguish them. So that is that's why you get those weird blended images on AI.
Is that
that's definitely AI?
Is that the same reason why you get like 6 fingers on a hand with some of them?
Yeah.
Or like 8 toes? Yeah. Interesting.
Or a third arm, because the AI is just averaging out a bunch of images, and it doesn't actually understand that a human is bipedal and has 2 arms. So because it's not capable of understanding, it's not real AI.
Gotcha.
I think the whole notion of AI is massively exaggerated. It's not much to worry about. They're just very advanced, very expensive programs created to amalgamate stuff that it finds online.
I tried to do an of a footballer kicking a ball, and it actually made me nauseous because it had made it so that his knee was sort of putting up the wrong way. It looked like but this reminds me, because it's sort of hollow in the middle, that knife. So it reminds me of those knives that they used in Star Trek 3, the Klingons. They had those special knives with the edges came off. It was kind of cool. So anyway, I digged around with AI and I came up with my own modern equivalent of what Disney would be like today at Thanksgiving. That's what I came up with. So got Minnie Mouse has got the green hair. Disney has no money, so they can only serve up Brussels sprouts to the extremely unhappy children. And you can see in the background the Disney stock price collapsing. And I don't know why, but there's a little Papa Smurf here in the background. I don't know what happened there. I don't even know if that's IP for Disney.
I would have had them serving a plate full of bugs, like, meat is evil, and even vegetables requires a little bit too much carbon footprint. So just, shut up and eat the bugs. And that'll be the kids' Thanksgiving.
I'm a little shocked at how few trans kids there are in this picture, in all honesty.
True. Yeah. Well, the kid in the red beanie maybe could go either way.
On the other wall, you had room for a trans flag, and you missed it.
That's true.
You missed
there you go. Yeah.
Represent.
You
missed a chance for signaling.
Yeah. I'm sorry, guys. I tried my best. All right. So let's move on to this. So our first item of news is this, which is Daryl Dave Filoni, the guy who
points on your social credit score.
Yeah. So Daryl Dave Filoni, the guy who keeps failing upward. He has a new mission in the Star Wars universe after guiding Rosario Dawson's force-wielding hero to distant celestial realms in the first season of Ahsoka. The writer, producer, director, who started out working alongside George Lucas on the animated Clone Wars show nearly 2 decades ago, has ascended to a new position at Lucasfilm, one that will give him input into all the galactic storytelling going forward. So I don't understand Dave Filoni because he had The Mandalorian season 1, maybe season 2 is his big triumph. And around that, you've got Clone Wars, no one really cares about. Rebels, no one really cares about. The Bad Batch, no one really cares about. Ahsoka, which he helmed, which has got the lowest ratings of any Star Wars project. So doesn't have much to hang his black hat on. So as far as I'm concerned, in terms of being a creative genius or some kind of maverick who's pushing the studio forward. So does this news, is this like an early Christmas present for you or just another one sad shrug?
It's just, it doesn't mean anything. It's like, well, Disney decided to flog a dead corpse a little more, or they decided to change the position of a dead corpse to make it look slightly more animated. Maybe it's like those two guys at Weekend at Bernie's. Hey, what if we changed Bernie's shirt? He'll look a little bit more alive. It's utterly irrelevant. It's Star Wars. It's dead. No one cares. Everybody's checked out. I've posted a Star Wars video recently. It's one of my least popular videos, like recently. Even like among like the people that are saying this stuff is garbage, they're checked out. Like no one cares about this stuff. And I've noticed that reviewers are just reviewing it less and less, even on YouTube, because people are checked out, man. They just don't care. So Dave Filoni can take over. It's not going to change anything. The guy's crap.
It's true.
His writing is bloody awful. Ahsoka, it wasn't as bad as Obi-Wan or Mando season 3, but it was bad. There's absolutely all that does for me is confirm that Star Wars going forward, nothing's going to change. It's going to be the same shite, oversaturation, complete misunderstanding of the characters from the movies, and now they've run out of characters to rape from the movies. So what are they doing? They're pillaging characters like Thrawn, and they're going to ravage those until they're Jesus Christ. I've said enough. Right? It's not gonna do anything. Right? All right. This is not news.
Well, the thing is, so I looked at, because I had sort of heard news that he was moved, and I wasn't sure what that was about, and I looked into it, and he's like the new creative director or something, but Kathleen Kennedy is still the president of Lucasfilm. So, as far as Kathleen, the Force's female Kennedy is in charge, she's going to be telling him what stories to sort of lean toward, and the stuff is still going to look the same. I also tried to look into like exactly, because I know he's had his hand in Star Wars stuff, but I don't follow it super closely. So I looked into it. It looked like Mando seasons 2 and 3 were Jon Favreau. And I guess he sort of was like a creative helper with those, but he had checked out and moved on to something else. The folks that I've talked to that have watched, like you said, the Bad Batch, Rebels, like these are not huge hits, but the people that watch them, they like them. So it seems like he's okay with 22-minute Saturday morning, 20 episode season type stuff. Like right now I'm in the middle of watching Avatar Last Airbender, which he directed. And it's really, really good. I'm halfway through the first season of it. I'm watching it with my kids. I'm going to do a review of it. It's excellent. And it seems like that's kind of his thing. Like that is his style. Cartoons, 22 minutes, that's where he needs to stay at. And then when he tried to transition over to live action, more mature storytelling, and this 8-episode format that Disney wants to do, he can't seem to write within those bounds. And then his stuff is full of fluff. I haven't even finished Ahsoka because I watched the first 4 episodes. I think the 4th episode finally got moving and it was interesting, but I had to get through 3 episodes first of just fluff garbage to get there. And it seems like he doesn't have enough to fill that out or structure those episodes in a way that makes any kind of sense, that makes you want to keep watching.
Yeah, I wish that there was like a clearer distinction between kind of junior Star Wars content and kind of more senior, large scale or more canonical stuff. Like if he'd been around in the 80s and like you gave him the assignment of like make these Ewok films or these like droid spin-offs and stuff, he would have been perfect. So if you'd delineated and had those clearer notions between a junior and kind of more mature content one, then maybe that could have worked. The other thing I wanted to discuss about this, so I'm not telling people what to do, he added, but I do feel I'm trying to help them all tell the best story that they want to tell. I need to be a help across the galaxy here, like a part of a Jedi Council almost. And we all remember how astute and clever and brilliant and decisive the Jedi Council was in the end. But this part here, look at all these people, right? So you've got Skeleton Crew, a coming-of-age story created by John Watts. John Watts is the guy who directed Spider-Man No Way Home. You know, that's incredible talent. Then you've got Leslie Headland, the less said about her, the better. But James Mangold, sure, he bungled Indiana Jones, but he's the guy who did Logan. What an incredible talent that guy is. Taika Waititi, Boy and Jojo Rabbit. Sean Levy, he did Stranger Things. He's the Stranger Things guy. And Charmin Obaid-Chinoy, everyone kind of like disses her. But if you actually look into what she did, she's a 2-time Academy Award winner for doing these exquisitely poignant, in-depth explorations of Pakistani culture and stuff. And maybe you can argue that she doesn't belong in mainstream mass entertainment, but she's got a great pedigree. So my point here is that Disney is where great people and great careers almost uniformly go to die. No one comes out of Disney looking better. No one's career looks better. So it's a talent hole. It just sucks up these people who are brilliant and sucks the meat off their bones and leaves them as these creative wrecks. So it's a shame.
I mean, they obviously go over there to get a big fat paycheck, but the reality is that the creative decisions at Disney are taken at an executive level. So if you're going to go to Lucasfilm and make Indiana Jones, you're not making that unless Kathleen Kennedy okays all the major creative decisions, because she was the main producer for that movie and she was the main creative executive. So you have to do it within that framework. And then once you finish, then the executives at Disney, not just at Lucasfilm, but the higher ups at Disney will then look at it and say, no, we don't like this, 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 and this. Go do some reshoots. This also happened with Solo. They had some really excellent talent in with Solo: A Star Wars Story, which is a now more or less forgotten movie from, I think, 2017. It was in between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. And it was a huge bomb and a pretty terrible movie. And what happened there was that Lord and Miller, the guys who do Spider-Verse, they've done both those Spider-Verse movies, and they also did the couple of the Lego movies. Really good, really talented guys. And they shot this Solo movie, and then Disney had a look at it. Kathleen Kennedy had a look at it and thought, nah, we don't like that. Go. So they fired Lord and Miller, and they brought in who was it? I can't remember, but they reshot 70% of it and hired something. What's his name? And
the guy who always bails out every project, who was in Happy Days.
Oh, I can't remember. Hard Shore? Not sure. But they reshot 70% of the project, and you saw the end result. It was pretty bad. And that's Disney. So it doesn't matter how talented you are, whether you're a James Mangold, who on his own, like if they'd just given him Indiana Jones and said, you do this your way, maybe it would have been okay. He might have been able to do something good with that. But it doesn't matter how talented a director is, and James Mangold is clearly a talented director, having done something like Logan. If you're working, especially at Lucasfilm, with all of that creative, anti-creative pressure on you, I don't think anything good is going to come out of that. So you can throw all the big names you want at Star Wars. The creative framework will simply suffocate out any possibility that something genuinely good is going to be made, because the creatives do not have sovereignty over there.
Well, I think that is what has been plaguing Star Wars for a long time. And to be honest, this job, the way he describes it, it sounds like a made up job. It sounds like a made up corporate liaison job where he's like, well, I kind of assist everybody. I plug in wherever I'm needed. I'm just the go-to guy, but really he doesn't actually do a fucking thing. And you're absolutely right. There's no creative control. So you're going to hire these big name people, but then you're going to put Filoni over the top of them and then put Kennedy over the top of him. And what you're going to get is this, you're going to get this same mixed mess that you've been seeing, where you can clearly tell that one person didn't have a vision that they were allowed to execute. And it was the exact same that happened with the trilogy. We had the first movie. All right, we're setting some stuff up. Second movie went in a totally different direction. Then they had to retcon a bunch of stuff. Each season of The Mandalorian feels like it's completely a different story, other than the same guy, Pedro Pascal, being there. So yeah, they don't have like these uniform visions, and adding this extra layer of supervision with Filoni being in this new made up job, it's just going to make that even worse.
But do you feel like, because at the time, Solo suffered from a timing issue where everyone was complaining that there was too much of an overload of Star Wars content, that too much was being pumped into the market. And that was a major, huge negative for the film that accrued a huge amount of negative reaction to it. Do you think if it came out today, reactions would be slightly more positive? Or do you think it would still be regarded as just crap?
I think that it would bomb if it came out today, just as it bombed back then, because it's a very bad movie. The fact is, I think if Solo had been really good, it might have worked, but it was just really crap. I mean, Donald Glover was really mediocre. Or not Donald Glover, Danny Glover. I was confused those two. Danny Glover was really mediocre as Lando Calrissian. Like he was an effete, emotionally incontinent and kind of weak version of what should have been, the real Lando. And Alden Ehrenreich was okay as Han Solo, I have to say, because that role is a poison chalice. I call that the Jared Leto's Joker problem. Where you basically have to follow up a legendary portrayal of a great character, and you can't win. It's a poison chalice.
Yeah,
but he was pretty good.
No one could do that.
Yeah, I think he did a pretty good job. I think he did a pretty good job as Han, because he had to also kind of imitate Harrison Ford, but also bring something new. Poison chalice, but just awful movie. And when they brought out Rogue One, I think straight after The Force Awakens, and they didn't expect it to do that well, but it made over $1 billion. So if the movies are genuinely good, people will show up to it. I think that's the fundamental truth. If you look at all of the Marvel movies in the past couple of years, certainly this year, the best one in terms of box office by far was Guardians 3. Guardians is the only Marvel project that's made any money, and wouldn't you know it, it's also the only Marvel project that's actually any fucking good. So that's not a coincidence. Audiences, as it turns out, like good stuff. Shocker,
The other thing with Solo I can never figure out is the color grading. It's like they found, where is the diarrhea filter? And we'll put that over the screen. So everything looks brown and washed out and horrible. It's
very dark, yellow, brown, and disgusting looking.
Yeah.
In fact, when I was doing that video on it, I was tempted to do a whole section on cinematography, but I was focused more on story, so I didn't bother. But I played around with it. I took it onto my own editor, and I turned up the brightness, turned up the saturation. I was actually very easily able to get this movie to look better, just on my little laptop. And because it's so dark and hideous and ugly and too yellow. Like, Jesus, man, just get rid of some of those yellows, turn up the brighter colors, the more vibrant colors, and brighten it. And it just automatically looks better. It's a hideous movie.
Yeah, they just took a nappy full of number ones and number twos and just splattered it over the footage, and that was their color grading. Very peculiar. And what's the evil Jedi dude's name again? I keep forgetting. At the end, who does the telecommunication call across the universe?
Darth Maul.
They
decided to necromance Darth Maul's top half back to life. And then they gave him some robotic legs, which you can kind of see in the video. It does make you wonder, though, like, did they give him a robotic, penis?
Yeah, good question.
Did they screw him on that one, Yeah,
maybe anyway. Chat can tell us. But I just love the fact that he ignites his lightsaber during the the intergalactic phone call.
Yeah,
like,
I came up with the theory. Well, I came up with the theory that he uses his lightsaber as a kind of compensating mechanism. It's like a phallic substitute. You know, this is a man who has lost his man parts, and he uses this as a kind of as an emotional coping mechanism. Like he walks around with his lightsaber, and anytime anyone looks at him suggesting that he's not really a man, he lights it up. You know,
Maybe it needs to be a light scimitar to make it more. Yeah. Anyway,
I recall this conversation from Mallrats, and you would have fit perfectly into that one.
I got to rewatch that show, or maybe I should not and just leave it as it is. Now, Hollywood might not be feeling so festive this Thanksgiving. The holiday period is traditionally a busy time for moviegoing, but audiences aren't turning out in force over Turkey Day, leaving the box office suffering from too much tryptophan. Is that like $100 a week drug in the US?
Tryptophan. It's like a hormone in turkey that makes you sleepy, actually. Yeah.
Okay, I get you. Right. In this drowsy state of play, Disney's Wish earned a lackluster $8.3 million on Wednesday. The animated film, which tells the origin story of the wishing star that's featured prominently in other Disney adventures, cost a hefty $200 million to produce. It is projected to earn more than $37 million over the 5-day period. I like how they say more than 37, so maybe 37 and a half. A disappointing number given its cost, and another sign that the studio is mired in a creative and commercial rut. Greg, what the hell is Wish?
It's supposed to be kind of a get back to 90s Renaissance feel for Disney. It was supposed to be a family fun, traditional fairy tale, a real villain, fun music. It was supposed to kind of harken back to the 90s and 2000s animation that they used to just dominate with. They didn't get there, but that was, I think, what they wanted to do.
This is sad to me that a film cost $200 million, and I'd never heard of it until I looked at this article.
I don't understand how that's possible. Like when like Spider-Verse was 100 million, Mario was 100 million, Turtles was like 80 million. This movie is clearly, I mean, it's obviously, it's all computer generated these days. They don't do 2D hand drawn stuff anymore. But I am struggling to find where the $200 million went. My only assumption is based on the way the movie plays out, and there's a lot of, I enjoyed it. I don't want to crap all over it, but there are a lot of issues. There are a lot of issues with it, and I think it's the same Disney problem where I think they obviously redid it multiple times, and then you end up with something that has bits of the first go around and the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth go around where they rejiggered everything, and that's probably where the money went, and that's probably why the plot feels so sloppy. And that's, I think, a lot of their problem lately is they can't just stick with an idea. They second and third and fourth guess it, and then it sucks in the end.
But 3 or 4 years ago, if a Disney film came out which cost $200 million and made $37 million over the Thanksgiving weekend, 2 or 3 years ago, that would have been a monumental catastrophe that would make the cover of Time magazine. But now it's nothing. It's just nothing.
This year, it's not going to be one of their biggest losses this year. It's going to be their 4th or 5th largest loss. It's insane.
I mean, brand damage is real. It's very hard to recover the public image of your brand once it's been trashed. I mean, you've seen this obviously with Bud Light. Bud Light have just thrown $100 million at UFC to partner with them to try to get that brand image back. And the reality is with Disney, it's not so much people will blame politics and say, Disney got too political and they got involved in the whole Florida thing where they wanted to indoctrinate people's kids in the classroom and stuff like this. And that's true. And that certainly didn't help them. But fundamentally, when I talk about brand damage, it's quality. When I see a Disney logo on something, I sort of think, well, that's going to be crap.
Yep.
Now, obviously, I think that because I'm a cynical movie geek on YouTube, so that's kind of my job to think that. But at the same time, the average consumer, just normies, know that now. They know that Disney sucks. They know that when you see a Disney movie, whether it's animated, Star Wars, Marvel, whatever, they know it's probably going to suck. So I think that's just what happened. That's where the brand damage has come from. Just too much crappy content. You've massively damaged your brand. When was the last time Disney produced a really, really good movie? I can't even remember. I mean, Guardians 3, it's not that good. It's a good movie. It does have problems, but in terms of like a really good, high quality movie, I cannot remember the last time Disney did that. the brand damage has been extensive, and people don't think of them as a premium studio anymore. They know that if they go into the theater, they're going to get a subpar product. So they're just not willing to pay the $428 it costs to take a family to the movie theater anymore.
Yeah.
They also kind of shot themselves in the foot with Disney Plus, because most of the stuff that they put out in theaters is on their subscription service within a month. So what if it's already mediocre product? Why would I go pay $15-20 per person? You go with a family, get popcorn and stuff. It's $100 outing. When I can just maybe wait for an $8 deal and catch it on Disney Plus in a month. There's no incentive to go see a Disney film in theaters anymore.
No.
That brand reputation thing is very true. And I think I've made a thing about this discussing Marvel. That one of the things about Marvel is that you couldn't see how the sausage was being made. Like, it was seamless, just the magic would occur. Now we associate Marvel with sloppy reshoots, with having to go back and do a month's worth of stuff, and then the VFX getting shunted in at the last minute, and there being troubles there. So that sheen of professionalism and magic has kind of dissipated at Marvel as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, and it builds on like a negative momentum too. Like, I reviewed this one, and I was kind of just mid. I mean, like I said, I enjoyed it. My kids enjoyed it, which I think is the most important thing. It's a kid movie, and I think that's a valid criticism that you could make, is that it's not a family movie like Disney used to make. As an adult, you're going to see a lot of the issues and the plot holes and stuff, but people, I feel like really, I've seen reviews, people crapped on this movie. And I think 5 years ago, I think people would have said, it's kind of a mid Disney movie. It's not great, but whatever. Like, they kind of would have glossed over some of the problems. But then once you start to build a reputation of low quality, it's so much easier to pile on. And then people, like you said, they start to notice those problems. They see how the sausage is made, and all of that stuff stands out more. And I think that brand damage is causing that accumulation of negative PR for them. So now even slight mistakes are seen as much larger, and even an okay-ish movie is now seen as garbage. And like you said, nobody wants to. It needs to knock it out of the park to get people to go see it. Whereas it used to be, it's Disney, it's a Disney animation, I'm gonna go see it and take my kids, no problem. Now it's like, I'm gonna maybe see some reviews. Or Vex, you're absolutely right. In 2 months, even if I got to pay Disney $20 to get like their early deal or whatever, well, that's better than $100 on tickets and popcorn. So yeah, it's absolutely a no-brainer. And none of these movies are such an event that anybody feels like, I have to go see this in the theater. Nah, 2-3 months, no problem. I can wait that. And that's not a problem at all. And yeah, they have no draw.
All right. Well, this leads us on to the inevitable question, which is, what was Disney's lowest point in 2023? And this wish thing might actually kind of be it for me. Just the fact that there wasn't a huge fight or struggle. It was just not a bang, just a pure whimper. Something that cost $200 million that I'd never heard of, that made no money and attracted no commentary, because people don't think it's that big a thing anymore. People are kind of checked out. Is that the lowest point? So I'm going to divide this in two. So you can say what is objectively the lowest point for Disney, and also what was your personal lowest point. So my personal lowest point was going into the cinema on opening night for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and being 3 other people in the cinema. 2 of them, a couple making out at the back, with the guy saying, "Can we leave now? I want to get out of here." And the third guy being, I think, slightly mentally challenged, and who brayed like a donkey when Indy got punched out. So that was my lowest personal point. And I think my lowest objective point would be this wish. I didn't even know it was a fiasco. So, panel, what was Disney's lowest point in 2023? This can be Lucasfilm, Marvel, or just Disney in general.
I would say the Marvels is probably their lowest point, because that was a movie that it was $270 million, not including the marketing. It had the potential. It was in the best case scenario because Dune wasn't coming out anymore, so it had no competition. It underwent extensive reshoots. It was completely incoherent as a film, like messaging aside. Nothing in that film made sense, and it was like scraps of several other projects kind of put together. It was abysmal at the box office. Even people, like even normies, didn't like engage with this whatsoever. So I'd say that was probably Disney's lowest point of 2023, because they were still baiting people with Indiana Jones. They were still baiting them with Ant-Man 3, even Guardians of the Galaxy. It was an okay film. It wasn't that great. I'm not into Star Wars at all, so I'm sure if I were into Star Wars, my answer would be different. But yeah, personally and just like objectively, I would say The Marvels has been their lowest point this year. Because it sounds like Wish was an okay film. So, I mean, that's going to drive people to go see it maybe next weekend or maybe once it gets on Disney Plus. But if it were a shit film, then maybe it'd be a different story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think objectively, The Marvels is definitely Disney's lowest point, not only because it's an absolute box office catastrophe, but obviously because it's a $300 million box office catastrophe. It's very hard to overstate how badly that movie has done. It has done far worse than all projections. It did worse even than, you know, YouTube critics were predicting. It was an astonishingly just massive failure. It is the worst movie of 2023. That's not me being hyperbolic. You know, when I made my video on it, I said The Marvels is the worst movie of 2023. Very simple. That's the title. And some people in the comments were accusing me of hyperbole, saying, "Oh, come on, man, why the clickbait title? It's not that bad. It's an okay movie." By the way, that is the only defense I've heard of it. I've seen that every movie has its sort of go-to defense, right? And the go-to defense for the Disney stands and the shills, their go-to defense that they have constructed for The Marvels is, it's not that bad, and there's nothing wrong with liking an okay movie. This movie is not okay. This is not a mediocre movie. Believe me, this is an absolutely appalling mess. It's a truly terrible movie. It does everything wrong. It is astoundingly bad. And it's also, for me, it's the lowest point for Disney because it confirms that Marvel, if not a dead brand, it is a dying brand. It's in the toilet. Marvel is just in an absolute state, and this was supposed to be their golden goose, their biggest studio that would produce hit after hit, and it's commercially right now Marvel is dead. Commercially, maybe it can be revived. I don't think it's as bad as Lucasfilm. I don't think Star Wars can be revived. I think Star Wars is dead as a rusty coffin nail. So Marvel isn't quite that there yet, but Jesus, it's getting there. And I think that Disney are sort of they're beginning to panic. They're realizing, okay, if Marvel is going down, then what hope is there for any of our other, you know, studios? And it was also a total rejection on the part of the audience of everything that Marvel have been trying to essentially socially engineer into the audience and to socially engineer into the cultural landscape. They don't like the fact that audiences are drawn to male-led superhero movies and male-led superhero franchises. They want to, I basically just call it a castrated male franchise. Like what Kathleen Kennedy has done at Lucasfilm. She's tried to turn Star Wars into a female franchise. A castrated male franchise is not a female franchise. Okay. Similarly, if you take a man and you remove his genitals, he does not become a woman. He's just a mutilated man, and that's all that these franchises are. They are mutilated male franchises, and no one wants to date a guy who's had that kind of surgery, right? No offense to people like that. And just reality here. I mean, I suppose some weirdos do, but that's their thing, you know, more power to them. And very few people want to see these castrated male franchises. Very few people want to go to the cinema and watch three women run around in leather jumpsuits pretending to be badasses. It's just awful to look at. It's weird, it's boring, and it sucks so much ass. Like, there's not enough ass. If you collectivized all of the ass of humanity, it sucks more ass than that.
I think the scene where they're doing the skipping rope, I mean, that's surely the most cringe, desperately painful, oh my God, we're at a low point moment there. That was pretty bad.
No, I think the best was when they tried to justify planetary level genocide for the sake of saving another group of people that were already kind of doing fine scattered across the universe, or also just letting 3 planets also die in their fight the none of it made sense. All of the characters were just terrible for no reason. There was no semblance of plot, of development, of even just like the world building contradicted itself like every 5 to 10 minutes. It's Like genuinely, it's a shit film. Like objectively speaking, there's so much you could like. It's not even shitty for the sake of like, oh, it's so bad it's good, like Batman and Robin kind of. No, it's just there's nothing memorable about this film that you can, you know, like point and say like, oh, I wouldn't mind just throwing that on in the background.
I think in 10 years, in 10 years, it might actually become a kind of cultural artifact, a weird little curiosity that people will watch and with a wry kind of head shakes and smiles and go, wow, the culture actually got to this strange point 10 years ago.
I don't know. I don't even know that it was like I don't even know that it's going to be that so bad it's good. It's just I don't think it's going to get like to The Room type quality where it's just so awful it's fun to laugh at. It's just I don't know. It's
just painful.
Yeah. But you know, I think that it showed a lot of the failings of Disney's strategy because they're moving. Not only are they moving away from their male audience, but they want to move toward a younger audience. And the younger audience didn't show up. Gen Z doesn't care about the Marvels. They grew up with it their whole life. Their parents loved it and all of that, and they're just not super into it. And so this new younger direction, they want the Young Avengers. They're trying to push, obviously, Ms. Marvel. They're obviously trying to push Kate, whose name I can't remember, Hawkeye. They want these younger female heroes, and the younger female audience could not care less. And it's a complete rejection of their strategy and shows what a failure that it is. But also it showed the desperation they have because at the last minute, they called an audible and cut like 45 minutes out of this movie. And you know, of course, there's a million unconfirmed rumors, but one of the ones that Bishop, that's what it is. One of the ones that I do believe, because Valkyrie was in the movie, but she was just there and made no sense. And so one of the stronger rumors is that Captain Marvel and Valkyrie were going to have a relationship, which it seems like a solid setup for that. And then they were like, oh shit, we have to cut all this stuff out. The audience is completely rejecting all of this social engineering that we are doing. And that's why you end up with a movie that makes no sense from scene to scene, because they looked and thought, okay, anything that represents our social politics, we need to cut that out. And then there was no movie left at that point. But since you guys all, I mean, y'all took the Marvels, I'm going to go with Mandalorian season 3. I think that was one of their lower points as well, because it showed that they have no ideas. And Mandalorian season 1 was a huge success. People loved it. Season 2 was all right. And they were like, we have to keep milking this, but we don't know how. And we hate the fact that Mandalorian, we hate the male superhero. We hate the male lead. We need to bring Bo-Katan in. The audience doesn't give two shits about Bo-Katan, but they still wanted to make it her show and like transition to her. The show is about 80% fluff, stuff happening on screen that does not move the story in any way whatsoever. An entire episode is just a side quest. That I think was a low point that shows that as a company, they have no ideas. They have no stories to tell anymore.
With The Mandalorian, if they just kept it a cool show where this guy week to week has a mark that he has to get and just keep it really intimate and cool, that would have been great. But now we've got a point where there's hundreds of Mandalorians streaming out of spaceships, going onto planets, and there's carnage and explosions.
They tried to do world building, but the world building really doesn't even make sense. So, for example, they put helmets on kids. That doesn't make sense for a lot of reasons. It's essentially a form of foot binding. It would retard their mental and emotional development. Like if children can't see faces, they can't. Like the whole Mandalorian wearing helmets for everything is dumb. Right? It doesn't work. Your children are going to be emotional spastics. They're not going to be able to communicate. We've seen this with COVID. A lot of kids had developmental problems because they couldn't see people's faces. They found it difficult to read emotions. And a lot of the kids are emotionally disconnected. The data is still coming in on it, but it's really tragic and very fascinating. And you would get the same thing with these Mandalorian people who are wearing helmets. Now, you might say to me, oh, come on, Despot, you're being too pedantic. It's just a Star Wars show. No, if you want to do world building, you must have a reverence for the details, right? That's why Andor was good, because it actually respected the details. If you have no respect for the details, if you're not willing to go into the nitty gritty, then don't do world building, okay? Just do something else, like what you said. Just do a sort of a show where every week he has to hit his mark, and they don't worry too much about the whole world building thing, and they don't try to make that a mainstay of the show. All right, but if you're going to try to make it a mainstay of the show, then you have to pay attention to the details. But if there is one moment that I would say that kind of sums up Disney today, it would be when the Mandalorian returns with Baby Yoda at the start of episode 1. That, for me, was basically when people looked, they just checked out of it and they looked at it and they thought, why is Baby Yoda there? I thought that he was gone. Why does the Mando have him? They have him for merchandise. They still need their merchandise. They don't want to lose that. So,
yeah. All right. Well, let's make things a little bit more cheerful, and I want to find out what you guys, what were your best films of 2023? So, amongst all the dross, all the cinematic nightmares, the flops, the terrors, the bloatedness, the disconnectedness, the lecturing, the virtue signaling, the sickening, nauseating swirls of CGI, were there a couple of gems amongst it all where you thought, yes, I still have faith in cinema?
Yes, I wrote these down so I wouldn't forget them. All right. I really enjoyed Tetris, that Apple film that came out at the beginning of the film.
Yes, that was great.
I thought the way it was edited was beautiful. Like it actually feels like a Tetris game as it starts to reach the climax of the film. So I really appreciated that. I also enjoyed The Covenant, which came out in the spring with was it Jake Gyllenhaal?
I think so.
The Guy Ritchie film, the two vets that get like stranded in a desert and then they kind of fight their way back and it kind of becomes like a friendship rescuing, very masculine story. It got overshadowed by Super Mario Bros, so it did very poorly at the box office, but I thought that was a phenomenal film. I think that's one of Guy Ritchie's best since Snatch. And then there was a Argentine film called When Evil Lurks that came out in September or October. Very heavy on the religious imagery and influences. Pacing is beautiful. The performances are beautiful. Truly terrifying in a lot of respects. Like overall, just a beautifully done film from start to finish. So those are like 3 that stand out from this year for me.
Yeah, those are great. Tetris was it's a miracle really, because 90% of the film is people talking in rooms.
Right.
But there's just such an intense tension to it, and you feel this kind of this desperate desire that you want this guy to succeed.
Right. Yeah. You're on edge. It knows how to set the tone for the film and build the tension up. So honestly, I'm surprised that not as many people talked about it when it came out, because it's very interesting the way it was put together.
And Taron Egerton, he's great. He did Elton John, but he also did this really obscure series called Blackbird, where he has to go undercover into prison. And that was fantastic, and I wish more people would go see that. That's been on my watch list
forever.
It's so good. Well, those were great picks. So desperate. Gonna have to rise to the occasion after that.
Yeah. Well, I'm with Vex on this one. I did a little. I wrote these down so I wouldn't forget them. So basically, I've got 2 categories here. I've got good movies and also rants. Right. So the good movies, these are the ones that I would definitely recommend watching, and the also rants are, you can watch them. They're decent. And so I also have Tetris in my best of the year list. I think Tetris was an excellent movie. And not just in terms of the story and the pacing and everything, it's so cleverly filmed. If you look at sort of the wider shots or the establishing shots, you'll notice that they have chosen to use shapes and buildings that are very rectangular. Look at the imagery in the background. Look at the imagery of the movie. It's very blocky, because they want to present the movie almost in this Tetris landscape. And that's
partly to do with being in Moscow, where they've got that kind of brutalist architecture.
But it really works well when they're in Moscow, because Soviet architecture was so hideous. And it was just all geometric blocks. It was, my God, it was like, anyway, that's another discussion. But it's very blocky. It looks great. And the performances are wonderful. And the other thing that the movie does well that you would never, if you wait until cometh the rapture, you would never see this from Hollywood. A movie which tries to capture and portray male ambition on screen.
Yes, absolutely.
The male desire to go out into the world and make some bread. And the guy isn't just doing it for himself. He's trying to support his family. He's got a wife in Japan, and they've got a kid. And it's not just that for himself. He's not just doing this for egotistical reasons. That man has a family to support, and he wants to win. He wants to be successful for his family. And that is what drives a man, you know, to get out into the world and to earn for your family and yes, for yourself, to be a success. And for a movie to just embrace that, not to try to drag the guy down, not to spit in his face for being a toxic man. That's what builds the world, you know, men going out trying to be successful. So I love that about Tetris. The other one was Blackberry. Blackberry is a wonderful movie.
I need to see that.
Basically, it's the story of Blackberry, that the phone.
Yeah.
And from start to finish. And it's a great movie because, you know, we all know what's happened. We all know what happened to Blackberry, but it's such a brilliant rise and fall story. We don't have enough of those. We don't have enough rise and fall stories. They're wonderful. It's like a Rome story, like the kind of the collapse of the Roman Empire, but in you know, real time, because it all happened within the space of a few years. Wonderful story. And I think that's a wonderful genre that Hollywood could do a lot more with, like a rise and fall story, because they're so much fun. And it naturally lends itself to a dramatic arc, to a dramatic narrative. And the dramatic arcs in that movie are beautiful. So you've got the two main geeks who start Blackberry. One of them stays true to geek culture, and the other one goes corporate, and he becomes kind of the villain. Wonderful stuff. And the way it's structured, is really good. Blackberry is wonderful. I also thought that Spider-Verse was very good. I'm not going to talk too much about Spider-Verse. I'm sure you've all seen it. Spider-Verse was probably the only really good mainstream Hollywood movie that came out this year. There were a few issues with it, but those were minor. I thought it was a terrific movie, and the animation was beautiful. By the way, that was made by Lord and Miller, the same guys Kathleen Kennedy fired from Lucasfilm, because they'd probably made a fairly decent version of Solo. And the last one I've got on this list is Extraction 2, which I just thought was a really fun wall-to-wall action movie.
That was fun, yeah.
Just sometimes you just need some good violence. You need to see 200 or 300 guys shot, you know. And then the also-rans. So for the also-rans, I've got Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, pretty good. Guardians 3 and The Creator. The Creator's a good movie, but a lot of people were frustrated with it because they were expecting a big sci-fi epic, and instead I think it's a much more heartfelt kind of love story told through a sci-fi lens. So if you're going in for like this massive sci-fi thing and you want all the world building, you're not going to get that. But I thought it was a lovely movie and beautiful in parts, but although the world building is kind of iffy. So those were my picks.
That Tetris thing you're talking about, there is a subgenre of that, and all of the films in that subgenre are great when you have just guys who just have this struck deep down fundamentally with this avaricious need. They've got a concept and an idea, and there's almost this desperation and hunger. And they're not always really well-educated guys, and sometimes they can be socially awkward, but they have this thing, and they have a sense that it can become like the founder, like the guy who basically stole McDonald's off these other two guys.
That was a great movie too. Yeah.
The Social Network.
The Social Network. Yeah.
Tarantino said that it was his best film of the last 20 years, and I agree with him.
One of the best.
He explained it to me.
One of the best.
Yeah. Because it just has
definitely one of the best of the past 20 years.
Yeah, the fierce tensions of just wanting this new thing to succeed, and so it's almost like a cowboy Western kind of frontier element to it, which I think speaks really deeply. So those films are always great. So Greg.
I didn't see any films this year. I saw some movies. That's all I ever get to see are movies. It's usually family stuff. So I always feel left out. Like I'm jealous. I want to see more films. Like I really want to see some of this. I want to see this Killers of the Flower Moon. I want to see this Irishman. Like I want to see good, solid films. But all I really get to see are movies. But for me, I'm still going to count Puss in Boots 2 because I saw it in January, even though it came out at Christmas of last year. I think that's the kind of family film that Disney needs to get back to, because even adults can enjoy that one. It's a deep film, but it's also just bright and colorful and fun. It works on multiple levels. That might be one of my best movies of the year. But aside from that,
it's like I'm living in a war zone right now. I got drills and shit, and I got a plane going over. So I'm not actually in Baghdad.
It's just adding nuance. Don't worry.
Okay, ambience. Sorry.
Surprisingly, I really liked Dungeons and Dragons, and I liked it better the second time I watched it. I was a little nervous going to the theater, what they were going to do to it, if it was just going to be a campy mess or whatever. That I think that's a really fun movie. It's a fun fan service movie. They knew their audience. They had the references. They obviously had a lot of fun with it. Chris Pine plays it up. He does a really good job in that one. It had a few drawbacks that I didn't like about it when I reviewed it, but I watched it. We rented it again. I don't know what we did. We saw it again at home, and that's a blast. I could watch that one a third time. I really enjoyed that. Obviously, Spider-Verse was great, but without an ending, you know, I don't know where it's going to end up. So I'm anxious to see how that goes. And then, of course, Sound of Freedom is on my list. I think it was a good movie. I wouldn't try to straight-facedly say like it was an amazing, incredible movie, but I think it's an important topic and shed a lot of light on something that needs to be talked about. And overall, it was still an enjoyable movie to watch. So that one definitely goes on my list as well. And maybe an honorable mention for Mario. I had a good time with as well. See, it's all movies that I watch. No films whatsoever.
Sure. Well, I'll chuck in my 2 cents. And this, Return to Seoul. So but I'd recommend you check this out. It's an exquisite film.
Yeah.
A girl who's raised, so she's sent as an orphan from Korea, and she's raised in Paris, and then she goes back to rediscover her roots and her birth family in Seoul. And it's almost like one of those films where it's so intimate and so lifelike and so real that you almost feel like you're in the room with the people. Then you feel like those social tensions that come with that. So you feel so drawn in and so involved. And the character, who's a first-time actress, throws herself into the part. And we see her grow from a kind of headstrong and rough around the edges young woman to gradually establishing herself in life. And it's almost like you can smell the interiors of rooms. It's almost like you know this person and you know the social circles that they're in. And by the end of the film, she's a totally realized character. It's just an exquisite film, and I recommend that everyone check it out.
What is it? Question, what language is that movie? Is that Korean, English, or bits of...
It's in Korean, so you have to have the subtitles on, but it's fine. But it's a lot of these films, they tend to have, like, it sometimes goes into English, depending on, because people are so multinational these days that oftentimes a lot of the conversations will be in English. And the other one I recommend...
Sorry to interrupt, Dago, go ahead.
Oh, I just the other film everyone should check out is Anatomy of a Fall. This is my best film of the year. Simplest premise: a couple with their young son who's visually impaired, living out in Germany, in the countryside, remote area, in a snowy kind of villa. She's a writer, and her husband apparently commits suicide by jumping out of the loft. And the entire film is just the ensuing indictment and court case. And it sounds like the most simple premise imaginable, but the acting is so incredible and the directing is so brilliant. The ensemble cast is so fantastic. The kid actor is incredible. And it keeps you continually in a sense of conjecture and speculation, because you don't know if the guy was perhaps pushed, if it was a suicide, or if the wife had something to do with it. And it keeps you on this perfectly nuanced, balanced knife edge the whole way through. So it's just very human, very intimate. The conversations get into the nitty gritty and depth of relationships that can be a bit malign and convoluted, and they get sort of like gnarled and tangled up over the years, and those eruptions of emotion where people start expressing the deepest tensions and resentments, and also full of deep humanity as well. So an incredible film, and I recommend that you all go see it, because I think it's very special. How do I get rid of this banner? Okay, what's next in my little list here? Oh yeah, just want to talk about some stuff here, which is all these dudes. So biopics, it's like making a big resurgence this year, and Maestro is coming up. That's about the famous conductor, Leonard Bernstein. Although I saw one reviewer who saw it and said, like, it's one of those films where all the tensions are resolved and there's a half hour to go, so you just have to sit in the cinema waiting for everyone to die. Ferrari's got lame reviews, say that looks pretty, but that's Adam Driver under all that makeup.
Yeah.
And it's going to be nothing particular.
I thought it was Nicolas Cage.
That would have been way better. I rewatched Oppenheimer because I wanted to check myself and say I didn't like it the first time. I couldn't connect with it. And maybe I just intellectually had let myself lapse and I hadn't engaged with it properly. But no, I stand by it. I still think it's a strangely emotionally disconnected film that I don't especially like. It's far too long. emotional and dramatic cornerstone happens in midway or early in the second act, and the rest of the film is painstakingly full of self-importance that doesn't really connect with me. And Napoleon, I haven't seen it yet, but the relationship between him, well, you can tell me all about it. But just first, your thoughts on that, on biopics. Has there been a biopic where you thought, my God, that's absolutely nailed it. I know this person. That's a total incredible celebration and evaluation of their life. Has that ever happened for you? Can you think of a recent example? And your second thought is Oppenheimer. Now that some dust, nuclear dust has settled, have your opinions changed a little bit?
Oppenheimer, I really enjoyed that. It wasn't a perfect film. It wasn't one of the best films I saw this year. I actually probably one of the few that wanted it to be longer because I felt like they could have expanded, just more on the nuclear fission, the behind the scenes stuff, like all the stuff that they did at the university, like leading up to the bomb. I wanted to see more of that in the film. I do agree on the emotional disconnect. You do get that through, and I think that's mainly because of the way it's edited. Like it almost feels like very short, intentional stories just all wound together. But in terms of, I haven't seen Napoleon yet, but the one person I know that has says that it was the best comedy of 2023. So there's that. I was looking forward to seeing Ferrari just because I do think Adam Driver is a good actor. He just doesn't, I think Star Wars dragged him down and people don't see him as much else than Kylo Ren. But the only biopic that comes to mind where I feel like I watched and I knew the person was probably Wolf of Wall Street, maybe. Maybe that stands out because I recently watched it again as well. But from like you could see the transformation of Jordan from just this small town innocent dude to just absolute depravity.
That's great.
So I thought he did a phenomenal job in telling that story and us getting to know the ins and outs of his life. But maybe The Patriot would be another one, but that was pretty fictionalized in many respects.
Yeah, Wolf of Wall Street,
Michael Collins is a really good biopic. It's an Irish movie. They had an easier time with that one because Michael Collins was shot dead at the age of 33. Yeah. So that makes it easier for the director. And that's a really good movie, really fun biopic. If you want a reason to watch that, you're maybe not that interested in Irish history. God, I'm so bad with names on Livestream. Just a second. That was Alan Rickman. Alan Rickman is excellent in it. So if you're a big fan of Alan Rickman, but you maybe haven't seen all his performances, he's excellent. And Michael Collins, that's a really good biopic. And Wolf of Wall Street as well. That is a great movie. And I also love it because I don't think it's some people didn't like it because they felt it celebrated this degenerate and this con man.
No, it doesn't.
Where it absolutely does not. Although it excuse me, it's got that kind of American Psycho effect. You could call it the Patrick Bateman effect, where you take this absolute villain and you present them on screen, and a certain percentage of the male audience identifies with him and wants to be him. And that is absolutely true. A lot of dudes watched American Psycho, a minority, not, it is a minority of men, but they watched it and they thought, I want that. I want that lifestyle.
Yeah.
I want to be the guy that wakes up in a really expensive penthouse in New York. I want to fuck the most expensive hookers. I want to take expensive drugs. I want to be a Wall Street success. I want to be 27 years old and get paid $2 million a year to start, to pretend to do an important job. A lot of guys, like a minority guys, looked at that and they thought that's what I want. And yeah, Greg said it really well. I want to be Tyler Durden. Tyler Durden is a horrible villain, but he's been misinterpreted by really, for Tyler Durden, it's like more of a majority of men. And I found that a really fascinating psychological effect. Greg did a video on it recently related to that topic. Wonderful video. You should check it out.
Thank you.
One thing with Wolf of Wall Street, I think there's an allowable irony. Like, you can have a willful suspension of disbelief, but I think you can also, with the film, have a willful suspension of morality. Where you kind of go into it and go, I'm going to shut off my morality because it's going to be fun, and I'm going to just imagine what it would be like for this just for a while. It's kind of like a catharsis kind of thing. And the other funny thing about it is that at the end of the film, they wanted to show him at his lowest point, spat out of the system, where would he go if he was at his absolute lowest point? And he's just trying to lecture people, business people. And it's a scene where he goes to Auckland, New Zealand, and they're all like, "Sell me this pen." And he says, "Oh, this is a really good quality pen, so you should maybe try and buy this pen." So that was great.
Lincoln's another one.
Yes, I was
Lincoln's
just about to say
really
Daniel Day-Lewis in Lincoln was almost a perfect film, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's exactly what you want, and that's what Napoleon should have been. Jesus Christ, don't get me started on Napoleon.
Well,
oh my!
I know you're a history buff, and I'm dying to see what you're gonna the Napoleon video.
Well, we'll park that rant. Put a pin in that rant because I have to hear Greg's your favorite biopic and your thoughts on Oppenheimer in retrospect.
Well, I haven't seen him this year, and I think a lot of it is like if you're interested in the person. So none of these guys are just really calling me. But next year, Sound of Freedom, that studio, Angel Studios, they are doing a biopic on Dietrich Bonhoeffer next year, which I'll go see it myself. My wife doesn't have to go. That's fine. I'll go see it alone. That's a fascinating story. He's a missionary in Germany during World War II, and had a chance to leave, but wanted to stay and help the Jews there, and ended up dying in Nazi Germany. And his life story is pretty fascinating. So I'm very interested to see where they go with that. But you know, the other thing with Wolf of Wall Street, I haven't seen it, but I'm told that, you know, a lot of people think it glorifies everything about this character because he doesn't really, nothing that bad happens. But in a way, I think that's almost kind of an important moral tale that sometimes life isn't fair and assholes don't get the justice that you think that they ought to get. And I think that there's a lesson to be learned there as well. And if the movie tried to shy away from that, it wouldn't be honest about the shitty realities of life.
Also,
I'm actually
sorry. Go ahead. Vex.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm actually.
Vex, you have the floor.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, Vex, you have the floor.
Walk the Line. That's probably that's
We're
number
both
one
just
right
way
there.
too
Walk
polite.
the Line is the best biopic ever made.
Walk the Line.
Yeah, no, I'm surprised that a lot of people think that Wolf of Wall Street glorifies, because literally everything that happens to him that we'll say is, I mean, good, there's an immediate bad that happens to it as well. So he never actually lives a life where it's just, it's just drugs and hookers and money all the time. Like, there's a very clear, like, it's very clear that everything that happens to him, there is a negative that happens as well. And it, like, unlike, I'm trying to think of what other movie kind of like glorifies everything that happens in Wolf of Wall Street. But no, I think it does a very good job of de-glorifying it, if anything, because other movies just kind of make it seem like all of those things are awesome and like all these characters are living on cloud nine, and it was never the case for Jordan's character in Wolf of Wall Street. So it's Greg, you should definitely check it out. It's well worth the watch. Just don't have the kids around whatsoever.
Well, I was just going to say that the fall into moral depravity is in itself punishment. You know, if you're taking a lot of drugs and you're cheating on your wife with hookers, 5 times a week, and you're defrauding people, that's the moral collapse. That in itself is a bad thing. Anyone who thinks that the only bad thing that could happen is maybe you could go to jail, no, he's already being punished. His punishment is his moral collapse. That is a horrible thing to happen. And that is reflected in his life. He's surrounded by ass kissers, hangers-on, yes men, and gold diggers, instead of genuine people who really actually love him and appreciate him for who he is, like his first wife, who he, ended up getting divorced on because he was cheating on her. And he instead of having a company that's full of, conscientious men who want to go out and do a good job and really build this company, he just has a bunch of greedy parasites that want to get rich fast. It's horrible. It's a kind of hell. I think it's a brilliant movie because to me, what that represents is a man who is trapped in a kind of self-made hell, but he believes that he's living in paradise. It's wonderful.
It's almost like a modern satirical. And you've also got like the shoehorned in moral construction with the FBI guy who takes the train or the subway every morning, and the last shot of the film is, I think, that guy. Or one of the last shots, just on the subway still, and you see that he's morally upright and decent. But it doesn't explicitly make itself a morality tale at all. Sometimes, a good quality film is just in and of itself an exploration, and you can draw your own conclusions without having to have moral wall chats. All right. Well, let's move on to what else do I have here in my little thing? Let's go back to this thing. I'm enjoying all these things, by the way. This is not bad for a first-time stream, going around all this
Vex
stuff.
read it too, right?
Yeah, I'm reading Brian's code right now.
Let me think. What would you do to... All right, here's your question. What would you do to resurrect Marvel? So you've been put in charge for some reason. I don't know why. But that's a decision. And you've got the chance to turn around this gigantic ocean liner before it hits the rocks completely. So what's some basic step program? You're going to call in all the key personnel. You've got them around the huge boardroom table. Go. What's your PowerPoint presentation?
Let it sink and just let it remain for a few years.
Like, if it's going to sink, make sure you tie everyone down to the deck so they can't escape.
There you go. Like there's really nothing you can do to resurrect it right now because it's had a pretty steady trajectory of just poor quality, poor performances, like an overabundance of messaging. So I think everyone, and like I feel like Ant-Man 3 was the nail in the coffin even for normies because there was really nothing redeemable about that film whatsoever, and everybody likes Paul Rudd. So you can't resurrect Marvel right now. The damage is done. You need to just let it sink. Clean the slate, give it a rest, come back in a few years. Because I think that's kind of what they're starting to do because next year their only release is Deadpool 3. They're putting all of their hopes on Deadpool 3 next year. So I really feel like that's going to be kind of what sets the bar for everything moving forward, but just let it sink. There's no resurrection.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think a really good thing for them as far as like the audience goodwill would be just like make it as public as possible. Like really come out with big PR releases and just say, we're canceling everything. We're cutting our losses. We're canceling everything. We're sorry that we took this franchise in this direction. You guys obviously don't like it. We're going to come back with, the Fantastic Four, where Reed Richards is actually going to be leading the team, not Sue. And it won't be, I don't know, Pedro might be good. And we're going to bring out X-Men. And like right now, it seems like they're trying to curve back to where they need to be. And I don't think that they have the time available for that. I'm told that Secret Wars, I'm not a comics guy, but I'm told Secret Wars is kind of like a reset button for the whole franchise. But that's not due out till 2027 and maybe not 28 now with everything being pushed back. So I don't think that they have 4 more years of these sluggish box offices and like the brand damage we were talking about earlier. They don't have time to continue to let that accumulate. I think their best option is to very publicly just humble themselves to the audience and say, we're canceling everything. It's obviously not working. And like you said, Vex, we're gonna wait about 2 years. We're gonna brand new ideas, and we're just gonna start completely over. Make a clean break. Don't fall for the sunk cost fallacy of, well, we already have half of Thunderbolts filmed. We've already got half of Ironheart filmed. Whatever. Just cut it all, eat the loss, and start over again. Because I think it's gonna that would make them more money in the long term than continuing to waste money and goodwill from the audience on these projects that nobody wants.
Yeah. That's what they did with Batman in the 90s because they had 89 Batman with Keaton. It was a huge success. And then slowly but surely just it started to lose the quality started to dip quite noticeably.
Yeah.
And then because Batman and Robin bombed so hard in, 97 or 98, WB was just like, we need to take a break from Batman. And then they came back in 2005 with Batman Begins. New slate, new ideas, new creatives behind the scene, and it worked for them. The Dark Knight, I think, is still one of the highest grossing films of all time, over 10 years later. So it's worked in the past with big IPs. I don't see why Marvel wouldn't want to maybe explore that just because there's more benefit in it than not.
It's a good question. Do you think that Hollywood is capable anymore of going from vaulting up from the Schumacher depths to the Nolan heights? I don't know if Hollywood's got it in it. anymore to make that kind of
I think it does.
leap.
The smaller studios are proving that there is talent like still there. So just like look at everything A24 has been putting out recently. Like there's proof that there are still movies that can do well at the box office, have a positive return. Maybe there's some semblances of modernism or wokeism in it, but like storytelling and characters are still at the forefront. Quality is still there regardless. I think audiences are starting to realize that as well. And that's why we're also seeing dips in things like Wish, like that on a Thanksgiving weekend, that should be clearing $100 million easily, right? So the potential's still there in Hollywood. It's just I think we're in the early transition of audiences knowing that. That's all.
James Bond franchise also had a couple of those. It's done it like 2 or 3 times. So I think Diamonds Are Forever wasn't as successful as they would have liked it to have been. And then Sean Connery was also overweight in it. And it was one of probably his weakest performance by Bond. And then they kind of took a break and rebooted it and it was better afterwards. Another one was Timothy Dalton. He did 2 movies. And then after that, they decided to shut that down, waited a little bit because they didn't do that well. And they brought it back with Pierce Brosnan with GoldenEye. And it was really successful. And then they kind of jumped the shark with Pierce Brosnan and did Die Another Day, in which a giant North Korean laser satellite blows up like a glacier, and the glacier turns into water immediately and chases James Bond. And he
it was great. Like what do you mean?
And a hotel made of ice.
I want to make a video on Die Another Day one day, and I have a theory about it. I think that it's 2 separate movies, each one half of a masterpiece. They just don't work very well together.
Well, was that the one where the guy had the diamonds in his face?
Yeah.
Because
was that the one?
Great, that's classic. Metal jaw henchmen like that. That was classic James Bond stuff right there. And then right. But they went to a hotel made of ice and a giant space laser attacked him.
And also a lot of the tropes had become played out by that stage. This is also a problem with the Marvels. A lot of the tropes have become played out. And it had been made fun of by things like Austin Powers, and it had basically just kind of turned into Austin Powers. So they decided, okay, well, let's shut it down. Let's de-tropify. Let's grind it. And we'll bring in Daniel Craig, and we'll have a much more physical, gritty Bond. And I think that was a pretty good it was an excellent decision commercially. Daniel Craig's not one of my favorite Bonds, but I think it was the right decision to go with a more physical Bond, and a guy who would get down and dirty and fight in toilets. That's why you see that toilet fight scene at the start of Casino Royale. It was a symbolic sort of sledgehammer straight at the audience to say, this is Bond now. He fights guys in toilets. Yeah. So that was a really good decision. And Marvel need to do something similar, but I have Greg, were you finished or
no, I think so. I would say if you're going to go with like X-Men, they could, because obviously Disney loves this. They love this universe idea. They want to do this Mando verse now. That's what Filoni wants to do. They love the idea of a universe, and they could recreate what they did with Marvel with the X-Men. You could do standalone film. I would watch a standalone Gambit film all day. Obviously, people would watch a standalone Wolverine film. Obviously, people would watch an action romance, Mr. and Mrs. Smith style between Cyclops and Jean Grey. Like, you could do these standalone films leading up to an Avengers style forming of the X-Men in the school, and they could have their cake and eat it too. They could do their universe thing that they're so in love with now, and just go to a new franchise.
Yeah.
Well, I think have we fixed Marvel?
No.
Oh no, definitely.
Hold on, I have some notes.
Oh, you got some notes.
Oh,
I have some notes. So
he came prepared.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's so much wrong with it, I'll not go into massive detail on all of this because it will take forever. But basically, my thoughts were, yes, I said a full reboot with the X-People kind, not the X-Men, Greg. Okay.
I apologize for anybody that I offended by.
That's okay. Just don't say it again.
Mispronouncing.
Well, X kind of signifies a specific chromosome, doesn't it? So that's kind of.
But I mean, that's kind of an indicator of how bad the culture has gotten in the States and how big the stick that is currently up the ass of America is. Like the fact that Disney can't even call it the X-Men, or the fact that there's even a debate: should we call it the X-Men? Should we call it the X-People kind? Should we call it the X-Men, women, non-binary people, and people who prefer not to have a gender? Like, what are you going to call it? Do you know what I mean? It's so absurd. It's so absurd.
Greg, with the geographical stick up America's ass, would that be Florida? geographically. Well, Maine is coming in
California that's to stick up America's ass right now. I can tell you that.
Smaller, more grounded movies focused on character and story. So this has two advantages. One, it detropifies. So the biggest problem with the superhero franchise, and this is what people mean when they talk about superhero fatigue, it's that it's become too tropey. You really see this in the Marvels. People really know what they expect on screen, and it happened with James Bond. It happened with Batman. You have to detropify and start again without those boring tropes that have just... Blue Beetle was a great example of it. Blue Beetle is just a movie where they've copied and pasted a bunch of tropes from different movies to make this steaming pile of shite. And you need to get rid of all those tropes and start again from a different perspective. So more grounded, I think it would have to be a bit more realistic. Like the whole movie where a guy flies into space and flies back down, and then at the end of the movie, some giant thing appears in the sky and he fights it and lots of shit blows up. You kind of have to get away from that and make it a bit more grounded and realistic. I think if the superhero genre is going to come back, it's dead right now. I mean, I think this is the year that it died, but if it's going to come back, it's going to have to grow up. Right, if it's going to be a serious box office force again. So that you need smaller, more grounded movies. But the other advantage of that is it allows you to have smaller budgets because the $1 billion days are gone. And I would cap the budgets for these future movies at $150 million. And that'd be the ceiling for them. I would even try to get it maybe a little bit lower because Spider-Verse did very well commercially, but the reason it did well, it only cost $100 million, and I think it grossed $600 million. Now, if that had been a $250 million movie, that would have been a flop. So superhero movies cannot do $1 billion numbers anymore. You've got to just accept that, bring the numbers down to 150 million. Take a lot more time with the writing process. The writing process of these movies is way too fast because Disney and Marvel are oversaturating. So slow it down and focus on the writing. I think we can all agree that these superhero movies, and Marvel movies, they have a lot of problems, but fundamentally the biggest problem is that the writing absolutely sucks. So you need to take a lot more time with the writing process. And scripts should be written by one or two writers. I think that script by committee or script by insert diversity group here, like for example, with She-Hulk, they got a bunch of women to do it because it's She-Hulk, identity hiring. That's a failed experiment. Don't do any more of that. Scripts should be written with a creative vision in mind by one or two people. Scrap the multiverse, just get rid of it. Don't bring back old characters. I mean, you can bring back Iron Man, you could bring back Black Widow, but all you're really doing there is you'll have one moderate success, and that's it. And you've polluted the brand by bringing them back. You've watered down the MCU and you've cheapened it for the sake of a single nostalgia hit. And they're older now, and Black Widow's not as hot or not as athletic, and Iron Man just kind of looks like an old guy now. People don't want to see that. Like, just leave them as they were. Don't necromance them back for that tempting one-time box office hit. It's going to be a short-term success, but long-term it's detrimental to the brand. So I wouldn't do that. I think that's like a Band-Aid over a gaping wound. And identity hiring. So identity hiring is when you hire a creative leader for a project that shares immutable characteristics with the lead characters of the project. So, for example, in She-Hulk, because She-Hulk is a woman, you have to have women directing. In Blue Beetle, because Blue Beetle is Hispanic, you have to have a Hispanic director. In Black Panther and Wakanda Forever, because they're all black, everyone who's writing and directing has to be black. That needs to end. Okay, that's been a disaster, especially for stuff like the Marvels. They had to hire a third-rate indie hack and bring her on board because that was the only black female director they could get. But they had to do that because of their identity hiring policy. That has to go. You cannot be having Nia DaCosta's, helming $100 million, $300 million movies. It's going to be a disaster. People like that, they don't have the experience, they don't have the pedigree, they don't have the talent. You need serious directors for this stuff. The guys directing Marvel movies should be, fat 45-year-old dudes who have 20 movies behind them. All right, not indie hacks with 2 movies. And diversity hiring, just focus on the quality of the characters and the talent. And no more, this one's a bit more controversial. I'd like to get your opinion on this, Vex. So I'll make this my last point. Basically, no more all-female creative teams, especially writing teams, because I think that fundamentally superhero movies are a male, they're a male fantasy. Yes, there are a lot of women that like them, and I'm not saying women cannot be involved in the writing or the creative process. They can, but I think where it's all women, like the Marvels and She-Hulk, it's been disastrous. And I think that you need to accept the fact that this is a male first thing, that this is fundamentally for guys. And I think that all female teams, I don't think it can work. And I know that that's a controversial opinion, but I think that it's a failed experiment at this stage, and I would end that practice. What are your thoughts on that, Vex?
I'm actually 100% with you, and this is a comment that I make frequently in a lot of videos I've done and streams I've been on. Is the female creative in certain genres just does not work at all, just because women can't relate to a character. So you guys were talking about how guys wanted to be Patrick Bateman or Tyler Durden. As a woman, I can't relate to that whatsoever because my deep-seated desires are very different from what yours are, right? And like one of the biggest problems with the Marvels was they brought in a bunch of women that don't know how to write women in a male dominated universe. And it shows because all they end up doing is just turning these women into what they think men are and then emasculating any man that comes on screen, like how the father was trying to fucking kill a galactic being with a broom in that, you know, living room fight scene, or Nick Fury just sitting in a chair for an entire fight scene, right? So I'm like, I think there's still good female writers out there. Like I've seen a lot of more indie films where it's been like there's a female like writer on, like not just female writers, but the lead writer is female and the director is female, and it works because those are movies that appeal to the female brain. So it's women are just out of their depth. This, like, even with Star Wars, that's a male dominated IP. Why would you put women in there? And I agree. It's not to say that women can't be in there. It's just that they don't fundamentally or even objectively understand what goes into those universes to make them work and to make them appealing. So yeah, get rid of fucking women in all of these. People have called me a misogynist for that many, many times. I don't like, it's just, you have to like look at it objectively. It's not working. Like time and time again, it's not working.
Yeah. I mean, if I was gonna put $100 million into a rom-com, for example, I would want, you know, women in the room. Ideally, I would hire erotica writers, because the most successful erotica writers are women. So if I was going to make a rom-com, I would say, okay, I want an experienced male screenwriter in the room, and I want a 60-year-old erotica writer, woman. Right? They'd make a smash hit, Small. I guarantee you. Okay, not bros, gay rom-com, or what was that thing that? Oh God, what's her? The first woman to ever be in an action movie.
Jennifer Lawrence.
Yeah, Jennifer Lawrence the first. Jennifer Lawrence the first. She made this very middle of the road kind of junky rom-com. It's okay. It's not too bad. But honestly, just get an experienced erotica writer, female, and team her up with a, you know, old fat 50-year-old guy from Hollywood. They'll write a fucking cracking smash hit. Do you know what I mean?
Get this Sarah J. Maas or Mass woman. She's all the rage right now. Get her in there. She'll do something.
It's sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's it.
No, it's funny that you say get an erotica writer in there, because so Captain Marvel back in 2019 was supposed to be that film that got all the women like really on board with Marvel, and that was supposed to shoehorn this new audience in, right? I've said multiple times, like, they rewrote the comics anyways, so let's, like, the source material is out the window. If they had just made that movie about how Carol did, like, because there's a 6-year period between when she's taken from Earth to when she gets on whatever the Kree planet was, right? So for 6 years, we're just like, where the fuck was she? If they had just made that like weird, grapey romance mind control movie about what happens between Carol Danvers and Jude Law's character, women would have flocked to go see it. Yeah. Because that's exactly what they're looking for. They're not looking for female empowerment. They're looking for something that is like subtly sexual and appeals to kind of all of these base desires that we have. So if they did that with Captain Marvel, they wouldn't have to have bought the tickets for that. It would have made close to $1 billion on its own, because chicks like that.
I mean, I'm looking at the numbers for 50 Shades. That was $570 million. I mean,
there you go.
Yeah, the money was there.
Yeah.
I mean, with the Marvels, they had female director, female cast, female writers, and for some bizarre reason, they made the thing entirely sexless, which she's just floating up in space for half a decade.
Yeah,
and
that
Galadriel,
was so weird.
Completely sexless Galadriel, completely sexless Rey Skywalker. So you're getting these people who have the opportunity to craft these characters, and they're making them bizarrely sexless.
It is bizarre. It's really bizarre. In that entire Marvels movie, none of them are romantically involved with any men. None of them express any desire for any men. And none of them are even looked at sideways by a guy. It's this really weird, completely sexless universe. And I'm not asking for hardcore porn. Like Beauty and the Beast has sexuality in it. Okay, the cartoon from the 90s.
Yeah.
And it has romance in it. So it's just bizarre when they have that. I mean, you take 3 guys who don't know each other particularly well, you put them in a room, right? 5 minutes later, they're talking about girls, right? You take 3 girls, 3 women, you put them in a room. 5 minutes later, what are they talking about? Talking about guys. Like, this is human behavior, right? And when you see these people on screen for, an hour and 40 minutes, and not a single time do these 3 women who have just met ever mention men or romance or sex or guys, it's just not real.
It's weird. Yeah.
Nonsense. It's weird. It's really weird.
So a couple of things. Yeah, we don't want Robert Downey Jr. back with like his goatee with soy sauce in it to make it look dark. And you can't, like, I was thinking about Logan again. Like, there's a film where you've got a superhero, ostensibly, but instead of being a superhero character who also has human elements, he's fundamentally just a guy who also happens to have these superhero elements. So it's round the other way. So it makes it a more gritty, realistic, and fascinating, almost as if he's got a condition that he has to be conscious of and he's got to monitor. And these other 2 people with these powers are like liabilities to him. So those are fascinating situations and contexts to be in. So that's the kind of story that I gravitate to if there's going to be superheroes stuff involved, rather than sky beams and people pummeling each other in space while going at 1,000 miles an hour. Doesn't do anything for me. Anyway, let's move on to this, which is which one am I looking at here? And this, I want to talk about modern villains. So when Echo Chamberlain was a little nipper, he was watching a film called The Never-Ending Story. And towards the end of the film, little Atreyu, the warrior, is faced with this wolf. And the wolf is called the Gamork. And it has this gravelly voice. And the world is collapsing around them into a nothingness because people in the real world are losing their dreams and imagination. And Gamork is a wolf, but he's also, there's this malign creature or entity, darkness behind him that he's representative of. And it was mortifying for me. And then when little Echo Chamberlain saw Darth Vader, it's this figure you can't see the eyes of, you can't see the face of, who has this incredible power and presence and almost a kind of debonair quality, completely unhurried. And he kills subordinates. They fall to the floor gasping and then they choke to death. And he's utterly relentless. And then Echo Chamberlain got a little bit older and then he saw Silence of the Lambs, where the first thing you see of the villain is him standing in his cell in a very modest and civilized debonair pose and saying, "Good morning." And he's utterly terrifying because the guard, before the woman goes down to see him, shows her a photo and said, keep your distance because this is what he did to the last person who got too close. You don't see the photo. Your mind creates the photo and the image in there. And so he's instilled with this utterly captivating, mesmerizing there's something intensely malign about him. So villains, a show is only as good as its villain. And in the modern world, especially in Marvel, but also in Star Wars, villains suck. They really, really suck now. Thrawn was supposed to be this mastermind, but he turned out to just be like some random douchebag with blue face paint. And Dar-Ban, or whatever her name is, wasn't a villain at all, as far as I'm concerned. Kang, lawyer troubles notwithstanding, they made a billion versions of him, a billion iterations, which just waters down any kind of menace he might have had. So what has happened to our villains? Why are they not menacing? Why are they not enthralling?
I have 2 points. Sorry, go ahead.
No, don't get it.
Okay. The element of mystery is gone is one of the first things. So like if you look at like horror, for example, right? Like some of the things that make like things like say The Exorcist or Alien like really memorable horror films is that instead of showing you all this gore and like violence and everything, it leaves things up to the imagination and what you're like each individual audience member is going to picture something uniquely different to what terrifies them. So that element of mystery really is undervalued in a lot of writing in modern cinema, I notice. And then the second thing is relatability. So for some reason, we've gotten on, like, especially like if we're looking at Disney Marvel, they've gotten on this train of trying to like make all of their villains like normal and relatable. That's why we have films like Maleficent and Cruella, and they try to do it with Dar-Ben in the Marvels, and even with Kang. And so it ends up making them like anti-heroes instead of villains. So just make them evil for like no reason. Like that's exactly why Hannibal Lecter is so terrifying, is he still has that air of mystery and he's just evil for the sake of it. I don't need to know any more about him to be terrified of him. So I was, because like if you look at yeah, those are the two big things I would say. So bring back the mystery and bring back like eliminate relatability whatsoever. Just make evil again.
Excellent. Good slogan.
Yeah, I think they are. They're trying to go for they're trying to create villains where the audience is like, they have good points, and they don't need to do that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching a video one time. It was just a bunch of cuts of Aaron Sorkin talking about how he writes, because he's fabulous, and he was talking about writing villains, and he was like, you don't. He's like, first of all, you can't think of your villain as a villain. You need to think of your villain the way they think of themselves, and your villain should believe that they are completely correct. But that doesn't mean that they actually have to be correct.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to justify them to the audience. The villain just needs to think of themselves as right, but they can still be evil. And I think that Hollywood is kind of misinterpreting that idea, and they are trying to justify the villain while at the same time still making them a villain. And Vex is right. Now you have an anti-hero. You have someone who's not really a villain at all. I mean, Dar-Ben is the pinnacle of this idea that they had to try to make up some off-screen stuff that Captain Marvel did to justify her actions, but still have her doing some villainous stuff. And then at the end of the movie, it all gets resolved when Captain Marvel, so nobody's really the bad guy. Even Captain Marvel wasn't really the bad guy. Dar-Ben wasn't really the bad guy. Everybody, it was all misunderstandings. And you're absolutely right. There's no evil. There's no villainy. And yeah, they're trying to be too clever and make these villains who are like, oh, they have good points. No, they don't need to have good points. They need to believe that their own idea is good, but it needs to be corrupted and evil.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that looking back from Game of Thrones with Jaime Lannister, I think they began this new thing of breaking or reshaping the narrative arc? You can have someone who starts off a series evil, pushing a child out of a window in an incestuous relationship. But over the course of the series, they're framed so they can have not quite a redemption arc, but you can like them and you want to see them succeed. And we thought that was fantastic and a breakthrough and a shattering and a reconfiguration of, the contours of drama from that show. But I'm beginning to wonder if, in retrospect, it just kind of let a genie out of the bottle, where we get a bit muddled now with our villains, and muddled with the idea of evil, and muddled with the idea of redemption and that kind of thing.
I think a lot of the modern villains that come out now, they're very fascinating to me because they're an excellent representation of the moral degeneration of American society, and particularly California, because these are villains created by people who don't fundamentally understand what evil is. Mm-hmm. They haven't personally seen it in their life. A lot of the time, they may not have experienced it themselves. So in their view, evil and good, it just kind of depends on your perspective, man. Interfering with the genitals of a newborn infant girl might be evil in California, but in Somalia, it's great. That's their culture. You've got this moral relativism, which comes out of postmodernism. And postmodernism for me is one of the 5 core elements of woke. So I have a very clear definition of woke. A lot of people say, oh, you can't define woke. I mean, my understanding of woke is that it's a combination of casteism, feminism, Marxism, sexual identitarianism, and postmodernism. It's basically a combination of those 5 things. And one of the things that comes out of postmodernism is the idea that morality is relative. Okay, so like I said with the example of FGM in Somalia, and it's not relative. Morality is not relative. There is such a thing as good and evil, but at the same time, if you're an atheist, the Marquis de Sade, most people who think they're atheists aren't actually atheists. This is a problem with Irish people, for example. A lot of Irish people who are post-Catholic will just say, oh, I'm an atheist, man, because, they're so intelligent and free-thinking. The reality is they're not atheists. They're post-Christian. They're basically Christians. They just don't believe in God because they hold all of the same moral ideals as Christians, kind of, but they don't understand this. They don't realize that atheism is the belief that there really is no morality. If you wanted to look at a real atheist, look at someone like Marquis de Sade. Marquis de Sade, that's where the word sadism comes from. And the Marquis de Sade, I can't even really tell you what he did because I'll end up getting Echo's channel nuked, but just look it up. Some of the most depraved and horrifying shit you're ever likely to read. He was a 17th century French nobleman. And these people in Hollywood don't understand what is fundamentally evil. So you get Darbane, for example, the woman from the marbles, and she is trying to exterminate all of humanity, and they present her while she's doing this as if she's sympathetic. And it's like, she is in the process of exterminating 7 billion lives, and you're trying to make her out to be sympathetic. Are you, like, what are you doing? Do you know what I mean? They don't understand Thrawn because they seem to think that Thrawn is supposed to be a two-dimensional villain. But when you look at Thrawn and when you read the literature, Thrawn isn't really even a villain. Thrawn is a very moral-centered man. He has a very strict code of conduct, a very clear understanding of what is right and wrong. For example, Darth Vader kills subordinates. Thrawn would never do that. Thrawn wouldn't go around killing subordinates because he would consider that poor form. He would consider that to be against his moral code of conduct. Thrawn isn't really a villain. He's an extremely formidable enemy, but an enemy doesn't have to be a villain. But they don't understand that distinction anymore because they're all terrible writers. They just don't understand fundamentally what is evil. And I also think that, and again, this is postmodernism, they don't accept the idea that some people are just evil. And that is just the reality. Some people are just demons. They're evil and they want to go out into the world and create harm and destruction. And that's just the reality. That is just the human experience. Some people are, and we've all seen them, we've all met them. Some people are just horrible people. And if you take those people and you put them in a position of power, anyone who's ever worked in an office will know this. If you take that person and give that person political power, they will become a horrible tyrant because they're fundamentally just bad people, and those people exist. But postmodernism rejects that. They think that all people are fundamentally good, and that if you're doing something wrong, it's because you have been oppressed in some way, or you had a rough childhood, or whatever. No, that some people are just bad, and these writers, they fail to understand that. They fail to grasp that basic fact. Add that to the fact that the craft of writing has gone down. They're drawing their writing and their characters and their stories not from the great epic works of literature. You know, they're not reading 1984 and then basing their story building off of that. They're just watching. They're watching TV shows and movies that are 20 years old and trying to imitate them. There's no foundation there, and you combine all of these elements and you get these piss weak villains that no one wants to watch.
Yep. You can find better villains in Dostoevsky's body of work if you just read that. I remember Wakanda Forever, the character of Namor, and he gives a speech about how he's been persecuted, and then 2 minutes later he makes the decision that he's just basically going to kill everyone in the human race, and so it's so whiplash. I think it was Germaine Greer or Susan Sontag or one of those people in the 90s specifically cited the Marquis de Sade as like needs to be brought back into the discourse for their relativist worth and their disruptive nature. So you're absolutely true about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the point I was making is that Marquis de Sade, that is he's one of the few atheists in human history. Because, like, for example, Christopher Hitchens claimed to be an atheist. I don't really think he was. I think he had this notion of sort of post-Christian morality, and that morality just existed on its own in a vacuum for some reason. But a genuine atheist, someone who does not believe in any sort of divinity or God or spirituality, and does not believe that morality is even a thing. Marquis de Sade, he was a genius. He really understood that if you do not believe in God, there is no reason to suppose that morality exists as an objective force that needs to be followed. And he lived his life that way.
I was just about to say that Christopher Hitchens was relating a story about a friend of his, a Jewish atheist, who was in Northern Ireland during the heights of the Troubles, I think in the 70s or 80s. And he was walking down the street at night, and a voice comes out of the shadows and says, "Are you Catholic or Protestant?" And he says, "Neither, actually. I'm a Jewish atheist." And after a moment, the voice comes back and says, "Are you a Catholic Jewish atheist or a Protestant Jewish atheist?"
I'd say no, it's a good one. He was a brilliant man, Christopher Hitchens.
Yeah, it was good. It was shocking to see his decline when he got the cancer.
Yeah, his last book's excellent. It's just a book he wrote about the process of dying. Really good.
Yeah. Quite a short volume. Well, so we're going to try. We'll get rid of all this stuff. And we're going to try our lightning round, which involves going here. And then, we have to wait for Vex to come back, I suppose.
Yeah, I'll just a second. I'm going to get some water. Back in a second.
Okay, go ahead. Greg, do you need another pick-me-up?
No, if I drink any more coffee, I'm not going to sleep tonight. That's not going to work out very well. I'm trying to get rid of this gunk that I got going on. Supposed to have a video going up tomorrow that I wish I could sound that way all the time without feeling this way all the time, because I love the way I sound in that video. It's have you heard about this The Shift movie that's coming up this week? It's got Neil McDonough, who you'll recognize him if you look him up, and
The Shift.
No. That same the Sound of Freedom folks. It's their next movie. I got a video review on that one going up tomorrow, and yeah, I sound interesting. I recorded that one Sunday.
Okay, cool.
Sorry, what movie is this?
The Shift. It's from Angel Studios, from the Sound of Freedom folks. It's basically it's the story of Job.
Oh yes, I have heard of this. Yes,
in like a futuristic setting.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, this could work. It might not, but we're going to play the Culture War. Is everybody ready? Here we go. All right. This is the Culture War. And the first question is going to be, first of all, I asked you to come up with your answer to what was the worst show in 2023? And it's kind of a lightning round. You're going to have to speak quite quickly because you're going to have 30 seconds to make your case. And I'm going to ultimately judge the three of you. So, Greg, I understood you've chosen Wheel of Time as your worst show in 2023. Okay, excellent. Vex, have you made a choice, or do you need some time to think about it?
No, I've got a choice.
Okay, well, reveal it to us before we go into the round.
Oh, okay. My worst show of 2023 is probably going to be Scott Pilgrim Takes Off.
Okay. Despot, what is your
Mandalorian
worst show?
season 3. Mandalorian season 3.
All right, well, 3 turds there. Greg, I'm going to give you the opportunity. Oh, there'll also be a 30-second rebuttal time. So you'll have time to say why your show was worse than the others, or you can just add more further arguments. That 30 seconds will be yours to play with. So, Greg, you'll start first, and your time begins the moment you see the countdown clock. Go.
All right. The Wheel of Time is the worst show because it is an absolute bait and switch. It's one of the most famous fantasy series in all of books, and it is a story about why men and women need to cooperate, why the genders need to work together, even though they are different and they need to complement one another. And Rafe Judkins bastardized this to make a feminist power fantasy where the women are completely in charge of everything and the men are just whipped little puppies who make absolutely no decisions and have zero agency whatsoever. He completely no.
Your time is up. Yes. Okay.
The scripted
Vex, you're next.
All right.
Well, you've got another 30 seconds in your rebuttal time to use as you please. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, Vex, your time begins when you see the countdown clock. Go.
Okay. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. Same reason. It was a complete bait and switch. They marketed it as it was the main title character of the IP taking over again. But in fact, it just became the Ramona Flowers show where she began just fighting off against all of her evil exes. It injected a lot of identity politics that was unnecessary. It had no depth. It had no nuance. It didn't introduce anything new about all the characters we already love and know. It just bastardized them further and emasculate anyone that has.
Your time is up. Good arguments there. All right. So the stakes are high. You got to be on your toes. All right, Despot, you're up. Your time begins when you see the countdown clock.
Mandalorian Season 3 was one of the most torturously boring fucking things I've ever had to sit through in my life. I've watched all of Velma, all of Rings of Power, and I was almost in tears, bored to death watching Mandalorian Season 3. The worst thing you can do is bore an audience. It was absolutely shocking. Mando was completely emasculated, and they handed the mantle of the Mandalorian over to this weird chick. It was boring. It was interrupted by a 40-minute movie. It did everything wrong. It was absolutely terrible, and it's Star Wars is dead.
All right. Well, your 30-second rebuttal time. I'll turn down the volume on the clock here because it's overshadowing the last of your arguments. Okay. All right. So, Greg, you're going up against Scott Pilgrim and Mandalorian Season 3. So you need to explain why yours is worse and also add any further arguments from your script. So your 30 seconds begins when you see the clock. appear?
They admitted that it was bad because in the books, the main character is a man. And in the show, the director basically reached out through the screen and through one of the characters said to the main character, this would all be easier if you were a girl. That was a line in the show. It just demonstrates how much they hate the source material and men in general. I don't even need all 30 seconds. They put it right in the script.
Good call there. All right, well, Vex, you're up next. So rebuttals and any other thoughts you had on your show, and your time begins when you see the countdown clock.
All right.
Oops, countdown clock. Go.
Countdown
clock. Goddamn countdown clock. What's wrong with me? Oh, this is my first technical boo-boo of the day. There we go. You're on.
Okay. So the writer admitted that Scott was already a toxic male character, even though he wasn't very masculine to begin with. But instead of maybe exploring that or making him revisit a lot of the choices he made, they just decide to put Ramona Flowers in it, and they make her overly masculine to compensate for Scott's lack of masculinity. On top of that, they literally give you an entire episode where one gay character who stays gay just butt fucks another straight one into like sexual confusion.
Wow, you really brought it in. Great. Butt fucking right there at the end. That's the compelling stuff. Right. You're up. The time begins when you see the countdown clock.
All right, so Mando Season 3 is the worst because you two can at least hate watch that garbage. It at least has stuff that is kind of ironically funny, like a guy being butt-fucked into gaydom, or, you know, whatever else is going on in the Wheel of Time, men being told not to exist. But in Mando Season 3, there's nothing like that. It's unmitigated boredom from start to finish. You can't even hate watch it. It is just absolute tedium. All right, and everyone's wearing a mask. You can't even see their face. It's the most tedious thing I've ever watched. You can't even hate watch it.
Wow, compelling arguments all around. You guys really brought it. Wow. But there can only be two people advancing to the next round. So, Greg, I love you, but I think Vex just got it there at the end with the
right. I mean,
it was visceral. It was raw. It was powerful. It was compelling.
Oh, it was raw.
Yeah, it was raw. Yeah. Okay, so Despot and Vex advance to the next round, which is okay. Well, who was the worst character in 2023? So I'll give you a moment to gather your thoughts, and so I'll give you about 20 seconds. Despot, did you have anyone in mind?
Worst character
Velma?
of 2023.
Velma, compelling.
Yeah.
See, Velma got me monetized, so I have a special place in my heart for Velma because that got me over the hump.
God, this is hard. Hold on. Worst character of 2023.
Yeah. You've got Indiana Jones to play with. You've got
I mean, my short list was Helena Shaw from Indiana Jones, Velma, Darben, Disney's Thrawn. I won't call him Thrawn because it wasn't. You know, those are all really awful characters that we've seen.
Yeah, terrible characters.
I think I'm gonna have to go with Barbie from Barbie.
Wow, Barbie is your worst character in 2023.
I fucking hated Barbie. That is probably the one film that I just, with all of my being, I hate from start to finish.
All right, so Greg, you're going to help me with the adjudicating here.
All right.
But I'll go first. In fact, Vex gather her thoughts.
Okay, but no, this is in fact a trick question because you have to argue your character was in fact the best character in 2023. So Vex, you're going to have to say that Barbie was by far the greatest character that cinema has ever seen this year. And Despot, you're going to have to argue why Velma was the most wonderful, beloved, delightful character that anyone could ever imagine. That was a triumph.
All right.
Okay, good. So Despot, you're going to go first.
All right.
And here we go. Well, your time begins when you see the countdown clock. Geez, what the hell is that? Come on, clock. There we go.
And all right, Velma was an inspiring character because this was the first time that young Indian American lesbian girls could look at a Scooby-Doo show and see a reflection of themselves reflected back at themselves. She also told white men how disgusting they are. She was fucking so funny, man. Those small dicks jokes, they had me rolling with laughter. And Mindy Kaling just knocked it out of the park. She's an inspiration. She's a star.
Wow, that was great. Okay, so now, Vex, we're going to hear why Barbie was, without question, the greatest character, the best character in 2023. Your time begins when the clock begins.
All right, Barbie was the best character of 2023 because she shows that you don't have to be ugly to be a toxic feminist. She systematically destroys the entire world for the sake of bringing on the matriarchy instead of actually making it function. She also shows that you can look amazing and you can look pretty, you can be dressed well, and also destroy any semblance of self, destroy anything that your gender is known for, have nothing of value come into your life, and also...
That was all brilliant. I feel that you were leaning a little bit more towards the negative side of the character. But you don't have to be. You don't have to be ugly to be a toxic feminist. It's got to be the line of the night. That's great, but I'm not sure if it's enough to get you over the line. So, Greg, your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I'm with you. She didn't sell the pros at all. I gotta go with Velma on this one.
Yeah, I think I have to go that way as well, just because it was so much pleasure seeing Despot swallowing down the bile of having to say that stuff. So that was a big pleasure for me. Great highlight of the night. All right. Well, so Despot, you're our new reigning champion. So congratulations on that.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
And so we're just going to end on one thought for the day, which is... how does it feel to be partially vindicated? Because I feel that where we're at in our space in cultural commentary and criticism of Hollywood, that we're a lot different from where we were at the beginning of the year. That you've got media outlets who are gradually, with slowly grinding gears, coming around to follow up many of the threads of the arguments we've been making. That I feel that things like South Park have given us a permission structure to say the things we've been saying to a more broader audience. The Variety article about, like, I think it was, is Marvel in trouble? All these things, I think, are beginning to catch up or align with the things that we've been saying for a long time. So how does it feel to feel partially vindicated about the threads that we've been following and maintaining for all this time?
I would argue that I don't feel vindicated at all because we've been saying this for so long and we were gaslit for so long about it. We've lost a lot of good IPs to all of this garbage. Indiana Jones 5 is probably just like the peak of it when you think of such an amazing, iconic character. Crystal Skull wasn't that great, but by comparison, it's genius, right? So I don't feel vindicated because not only that, but despite like things like the Variety article coming out, the tides are not turning at all. Like there's no indication that things are going to get significantly better or noticeably better in the near future. So I'm not feeling vindicated at all.
I'm partially a little sad that it's becoming acceptable to criticize like the MCU and stuff because I won't get as many comments calling me an incel, and that provides me a lot of comedy throughout my day that people think that I'm an incel. But no, it is a partial vindication. At least, you know, there's a little joy in doing the "I told you so" dance. But from the looks of it, they're not going to go down easy. So there'll be plenty more to prove going forward. So that's fine.
Yeah, I don't think that they're not fully admitting to everything that has been going wrong. I think they've accepted the fact that, like when they came out and criticized and were trying to shill for the Marvel and trying to defend it, they did very much come along. A lot of the publications were pushing the same nonsense that, it's just racist, sexist, or whatever, istophobes who don't like the movie. But then you're right, there were some publications that were beginning to say things like, look, this just isn't working for Marvel. And then even The Guardian, in the wake of the Rings of Power calamity, The Guardian published an article which said, let's just come out and say it, Rings of Power was a stinker. And I think that was the verbatim title of the article. And what they were admitting was that they were going against the party line. The party line was that only racists and homophobes and bigots and, men who hate women and sexists, those were the only people that didn't like Rings of Power. But when even The Guardian was admitting that, no, Hollywood has a quality problem, yeah, there is some partial vindication there. But at the same time, I don't think that the mainstream media is going to admit to the fundamental problems. Like I was talking about identity hiring earlier. It's taboo in polite society and the mainstream to mention that and to say, why is a black woman with two crappy indie movies to her name why is she on a $250 million project? That is absurd. Can't say that. You'll be cancelled if you were in the mainstream press. So there is some vindication, but the cultural landscape is simply not at a place right now where people would be allowed to have the discussions necessary to get rid of all the toxic shit, the cultural toxic shit that is making these movies and TV shows so bad. Like, you can't talk about how identity hiring has been disastrous. You can't say maybe historical figures shouldn't be race swapped. For example, in the recent Napoleon movie, you would every now and again you would just see like a black guy just oddly hanging around, like a waiter or a server or a French soldier or a French officer would just randomly be black, or one of Wellington's guys. You see a line of soldiers and one of the English soldiers is black, and it's like you can't have those discussions, right? And these do matter. And women as well. Like after the Me Too movement, a lot of women were pushed into creative positions like director and writer and executive and producer, which they weren't. Most of the women weren't qualified for them. Like Jennifer Salke at Amazon, for example, she's a complete hack. Kathleen Kennedy, very famously. It's just been absolutely terrible. And all right, yeah, those are my thoughts.
All right. Well, while you're doing daddy daycare duties, it's good to go through some super chats here. This is quite a sweet moment for me. This is my first ever super chat in my YouTube history. So thank you, Anthony Blunt, for that extraordinary amount of $20. The Echo Chamberlain blaring music. Well, I do have my little segment opening intro music bits now, which I hope is entertaining to everyone. And then we have Charles Emerson Winchester III. That's an American sounding name. Favorite movie, Cade, The Tortured Crossing. Absolutely. Yes. What's that, the director again? The complete madman that Red Letter Media always tear up. Yes, I need to watch Cade, The Tortured Crossing. I'm looking forward to that. Bill Bonahan for $5. Thanks for watching all this awful crap for the rest of us. You're welcome. It's not always easy. I didn't make it through to the last episode of Ahsoka, for instance, but I get as far as I can through them. And you all know Mo Sislak. The movie Air was a pretty solid movie. I never got around to seeing that. I probably should. Yes, Amazon overpaid for it, but it reminds me of Tetris in the sense that it's a classic underdog story. Yeah, I definitely have to check that out sometime.
Air was an all right movie. I watched it just the other night, and it's solid. I think the pacing is a little bit messy, and it seems to rush through in a lot of the beginning, but not bad overall.
I also want to thank Josh, who's in the chat there somewhere looking over things. I tried to make you a mod, but my technical brain couldn't handle how to do it. So I'm sorry, but I know that you're there, and I appreciate you stepping by. So that's basically it for today, team. Let's get rid of Mo here and get rid of all these other things. I managed to do it without any particular technical hiccups. So that's probably the biggest takeaway of the night.
You did a great job, Echo.
And the pro transitions. That was amazing.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Well, nothing remains but for me to thank my wonderful guests, Vex Electronica.
My pleasure.
Greg, Owen, it's been a pleasure to have you all on, especially Despot getting up early in the morning. I appreciate that.
And 8 a.m., man. Like, what do you think this is? Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So that's it. Ka kite anō. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. And hopefully we'll make these things a regular thing. And I'm looking forward to hanging out in you guys' streams as well. So that's it for today, everyone. And thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, sir.
See ya.